I think we're good to go. Let's jump in. So today we have Chrissy Tignor, and I'll do a bit of an intro to Pandion, and then I'll do a bit of a bio and hand over to Chrissy. All right. So I think I recognize most of you, but for anybody that's new today, I'll just do a bit of an intro to Pandion. So, Pandion Music Foundation, PMF, is a 501c3 nonprofit that equips emerging music creators around the world with tools to help foster more equitable, attainable, and sustainable careers. Based in Los Angeles, PMF amplifies diverse voices to grow a more inclusive music industry by providing free weekly online workshops and wellness initiatives that connect independent musicians with leading professionals. And today we are thrilled to have Chrissy Tignor, who is a music producer, recording engineer, content creator, and former Berklee College music professor. She's worked with the likes of Splice, Spotify, Discovery Channel, TLC, and many other music tech companies, artists, and producers. And the theme of today's workshop is innovative music production. Discover how to elevate your sound. So I'm going to hand over to Chrissy.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Pandion, as well for having me. This is actually the second event I've done with you all, and it's been so great. This is the first online virtual workshop, though, so I'm really excited. And thank you all for being here, and I'm glad to hear where everybody's calling in from. That's really fun. I'm actually in Los Angeles. It's been really hot here the last couple of days, but it's recently lifted a little bit, which is great. So today we're going to talk about just different ways to elevate your sound when it comes to music production. And my light just fell down. Different ways to elevate your sound when you're talking about music production. And I've been a music producer for over 15 years, and I am always learning new ways to do unique, different types of production, to get inspired in different ways, and also just kind of improve my craft in any way that I can. And what I'd like to do today, because we really only we have about an hour, and then we have a little bit of time for questions. Excuse me while I try to fix this light here. There we go. We only don't have a huge amount of time. So what I really like to do is kind of go through my process with you all and give you some of the techniques that I like to use when I take my productions to the next level. And I think that's one of the most exciting and interesting ways to see it, is actually see it in action. So we're going to do that today. I'm not really sure everybody's levels when it comes to music production, how experienced you are. What I really wanted to do today, without having that knowledge, is really do something that's going to be accessible to most people, whether or not you have, for example, music theory knowledge, or you know how to play an instrument. I want to take this from the perspective of, hey, you might not have all of that background, but you can still make music. So we're going to be doing some techniques for production using samples. So I think, show of hands, you know what samples are? Has everyone heard of what samples are and loops? Perfect. I usually, whenever I start to come up with different ideas for production, sometimes I use samples as like a really great inspiration point. And there's a lot of conversation in the music industry about samples. Are they cheating? Are you taking something and, you're not coming up with it yourself? But I actually totally disagree with that. Samples are foundational for music production and have been for many, many years. And they can be really great as a source of inspiration. Now, the other thing that I want to say before we jump into this is that everybody has a different technique for producing and writing music. There is no right way, there's no wrong way, there's no right software, there's no wrong software. Any of the tools that I show you are just tools that I happen to use, but you can go and use any tools that are available to you. So try to think about everything that I'm talking about as more about concepts, more so than, hey, I need to go out and buy this thing, or I need to go get that particular piece of technology, or I can't produce. I don't personally agree with that. I think you can use any technology that's available to you to get creative. The reason why I want to show this with samples and why I love samples so much is the fact that, you might not be a guitarist, but you can use a guitar sample to have guitars in your songs. You might not be a drummer, but you can find drum samples to use in your songs. And some of those techniques for elevating your sound, even when you're using samples, are not just using samples straight out of the package. And we'll talk a little bit about that. How can we change samples to make them more our own? And how can we use samples to build an arrangement of a song rather than just having one endless loop loop over and over again. That gets really boring for the listener. So let's jump right into it. If you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to see if I can answer them as we go, but there will be some time at the end to ask any questions. So let's get right into it. What I'm going to be using today as a tool for my samples is a tool called Splice. If you've heard of it before, Splice is a really great resource for really high quality samples. And they have some great technology, especially for inspiration, for coming up with ideas. Because I've been doing this for over 15 years. I still get writer's block. I don't know if y'all can relate to that. Sometimes I don't know what to write. I don't know what to produce. I have no idea where to begin. And some of the technology that they have makes it a lot easier to be able to do that. So we're going to start there and build something in real time. Again, don't have to use this. This is just what I choose to use. So feel free to take advantage of any loops or samples that you have within your own toolkit. Here we go. So can everyone see this here?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So like I said, this just happens to be Splice. You might be familiar with Splice, or Loop Cloud is another really great resource for loops and samples. I also use Logic Pro as my digital audio workstation, or DAW, which has a lot of onboard samples as well. But this particular feature of Splice, I want to start here just because, again, we can get inspired. We don't have to start from scratch, and you don't have to know any music theory to do this. So I'm going to go right here where it says create in the top left. This is just the Splice app if you haven't seen it before. And create is this tool within Splice that basically matches samples together that work well together throughout this huge millions and millions of samples catalog. And it's very cool to hear things in context and have a starting point. Now, this is just going to be 8 bars or 4 bars, small sections, but it gives us a foundation and a starting point to bring that into the DAW and then start making that into an actual song. So there's a chat. Make sure. Oh, thank you. I thought it was a question. Okay, so what we can do is we can start with a specific genre here, or we can start from, just throwing everything at it and creating our own genre. I'm going to start from a genre, particularly today, just because that's what I usually do. But if you ever do use this technology, you can start by just putting any loops together. I'm going to start off with trap. This is where my mouse landed, so that's where we're going to start off today. And once I click on that, it's going to start matching some samples together. And I'll let you listen to it first, make sure you can hear everything, and then I'll go into detail about what I think about when I'm using a tech like this. So what this has done is it's gone through and it's found 3 samples that work together in this genre. And we can decide, do we want to use all of these? Do we want to use some of them? Do we want to switch some things out? What should we do? And this light is just going to not work for me today, y'all. Sorry. Sorry if it's a little bit dark. So yeah, this will allow us to just choose what we would like to use and what we wouldn't like to use. And we can completely trash this and do something new as well. And I'm going to just keep going. Usually I like to find something that I like. This is a little bit more exciting to me. I think I like this more. Okay. So in order to start building something with this technology, we're going to start with something that we like and then see what else we can do with it. And we have a choice of whether we want to completely swap out one of these elements here, the drums, the bass, or we can add something else as well. And remember, this is just to get us inspired to start. And we're going to bring this into Logic, which is what I use, but you can use whatever DAW that you want. We're going to bring it into there and then actually make this into a full song. So when I'm thinking about things like arrangement, when it comes to production, drums and bass are really foundational, but that's not all you need. What I like to think about are drums and or percussion, bass, or some sort of low sub 808, anything that takes up those low frequencies. Then think about some sort of chordal instrument. So that would be a guitar, a piano, a synthesizer, a pad, and maybe some sort of lead also works really well. A lead is usually just one note at a time. It's usually a melody, and that can be on an instrument. It could be a trumpet, it could be a guitar, a vocal. That usually is like your very basic elements of some sort of arrangement. But we have the opportunity here, as we're listening back to this, to add as many layers as we want to that arrangement, and then decide later if we want to keep them all or if we want to swap some of them out. So when you're kind of developing something like this, start off with thinking, well, how many different layers of this arrangement do I want to have at the biggest point in my song? How many do I want? Do I want as many as possible? Do I want to be really minimal? But think of at least just the drums, bass, and a chordal instrument as a basic foundation, and start adding on top of that. So when I hear this, I like it, but I feel like there needs to be more. It's cool, but it feels almost like a verse to me, if you know what I mean. Like it, I could feel like a vocal on top of that, some sort of top line, but there's something in there that's not like, oh, this is a chorus. This is the highest moment of my song. So let's add some other things. So the way that this works within Splice, you can solo each one of these and hear them for what each of these layers are. This others is usually what they would call a song starter, or have a bunch of different layers in it. And personally, I love that. That to me is just like a really, really great sound. I feel inspired by that. The bass, we can solo that as well. I mean, that's a very basic bass, but when you hear it all together, I think it does work. But if I wanted to try a different bass, I can just click this and swap it out. Too boring. Let's keep going. Okay. Not for me. And what you'd want to do is just keep going until you find something that you like. In addition to that, we can add other layers. So I'm just going to keep going and start adding some other things to this. And feel free to ask me questions as I go, but I'm just using my instincts and using my ear of things that I like. And yeah, you can do the same. So feel free to drop questions, but I'm just going to keep going until I find something that I enjoy. There's also volumes you can change here if I don't want that bass to be as loud. I just keep the areas. Let's add some more chords. That piano's really nice. A lead. Okay. Maybe some more percussion. Vocal. That I like. If this still work. Okay, so let me look and see if there's any questions here. Okay, what if you decide you like a sound better when you hear a few choices and go back? So you can undo on this one. For this particular, like on Splice, you can undo if you made a mistake. And what do we plan to do with most of your finished songs? Is that specifically for me? For my finished songs, I might
Would
save
you
that
like
one till the end.
Press OK to choose yes or to be reminded later.
Oh,
Oh,
bear
I
with
hear
us.
something.
I think it was for you. I'm just going to mute that person.
Okay, no problem. So I'll answer that question about my own songs at the end. But yes, this is a feature in Splice. So if you do have a Splice account, you can take advantage of this. But the reason why I want to show you this is because this required nothing except my ear. What do I like? What sounds good? And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about music production that you have to be classically trained or you need to have a lot of music training to be able to be a producer, when a lot of famous producers that have had huge success actually have never studied music professionally. And that's not to say, I mean, I'm a classically trained musician as well. I'm a woodwind player, I'm a vocalist. So I'm a classically trained musician, but that doesn't, I'm not saying anything bad about that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only path. So I like to demonstrate something like this. It's like, hey, this sounds good to my ears. Let me go with my own instincts and like use my ears as a guide of what works. And one thing to remember too, if you're using technology like this, notice how I don't really have a lot of repetition of certain types of instruments. That's when you start to get a little bit complicated in your arrangement. So if I have 4 basses, it's going to sound like a lot of low end and it might become a little bit too complicated. So as a starting point, try to keep like one of each of these instrument types and we can start there. And obviously this feels like a lot of stuff, but we're going to go into the DAW and start to make this into more of an arrangement that feels more like a song. It keeps people interested. So yeah, this is what I'm going to start with. And I'll answer this question, Tara, in a second. So why are you using Splice? Sync does not want to use these samples from what I understand. So that's not 100% true. Samples in sync as well as in just like production in general, there's a lot of misconceptions about what's allowed to be used and what isn't. Samples on Splice are royalty free, which means that the user is able to download a certified license for each of the samples that they have. So they are allowed to use them for a multitude of different types of projects. The thing that becomes a little bit more complex is when you're just using samples straight out of the package and you're not changing them around at all. A lot of times that is what signals, if you're putting something on YouTube, for example, that signals, hey, I've heard this before. Is this copyrighted material? Which all of that is, you're legally allowed to use these samples if you do have a subscription. And Splice isn't the only one. Loop Cloud, all of these are the same. But it might trigger something if you are using a sample exactly as is. What we're looking at here, though, which is really interesting, all of these samples, you'll notice that it's giving us a 140 beats per minute tempo here and B minor as our key. What this is doing is actually changing each one of these sounds and transposing it and time stretching or compressing it in real time. So this first, this one here, if I just play this, right? This sample is actually in C. It's not in B minor. It's in C and it's at 136 beats per minute. But we're hearing it right now with this technology at 140 transposed to B minor. So already by using something like this, if we take this out and put it into the DAW, it's actually already been transposed from the original sample and it's already been changed tempo. So this is another way to kind of get not around that, but like be able to process the samples in a way so they're not like immediately recognizable or get flagged for any reason. So yeah, cool. So here we go. I'll answer some of these other questions at the end too. Okay, so I'm going to save this. It'll give you like this sort of, I don't know, auto-generated name. I'm gonna get, look, it's a lifeboat. Great, we'll keep that and then save. And then we're going to go into our saved stacks, which is, again, just a Splice specific way of saying this, and then we're going to view our samples. So with each one of these samples, we can hear each one of the original ones. Notice how they're all in different keys as well, because they've already transposed it when we were listening to it and changed the tempo. And we're going to export these into stems. And stems are essentially going to be the audio files that allow you to take the transposition and the time compression and apply that automatically, so you don't have to go back and do it again. I recommend doing that instead of exporting the original samples, because then you'll have to go recreate everything that you just heard. But I'm going to export that. And it's going to download onto my computer. So then we're going to go straight into the DAW. And this little download that I've got is a little file, what is it called? A zip file. And then I'm going to click and drag and drop all of these samples into my DAW. And I'm using Logic again. So we're going to use create new tracks for this. There we go. And then we have all of our individual samples ready to go in our DAW. And the first thing that I want to do is change the overall tempo of my DAW to make sure that it's lining up with what the samples were when we were listening back to them. If you forget for any reason, you can see that it was 140 beats per minute. It does actually print that onto the stem export. So I want to make sure I change that here to 140. And there you go. And now everything should be lined up. We're going to listen to it back just to make sure. Cool. So everything's lined up. We had our click on. I don't like to keep the click on after that because I think it hurts my ears. I don't like it unless I need it. Totally up to you. Another thing that I like to do once I get stuff into the DAW like this, I want to make sure that we're going to do some like color coding and some labeling, because I like to keep things organized. To me, this looks really messy. I want to keep things as organized as possible. So these are my drums. I'm just going to go through and change these. This was our hook, I'm going to call it. That's that cool little this. Okay. This was our bass. Okay, and then we have our piano, which is nice. Okay, and cool. This was our little synth, and then we have our percussion, and then our vocal. Okay, so once I have this in here, I can also like change the colors of each of these regions. Again, personal preference. Feel free to do what you like. I like to keep certain types of instruments together. So like I'll keep my hook up with my synths. In this way, I usually do drums, bass, synths, any chordal instruments, and then vocals last. So I'm going to keep my percussion and my drums the same color. And again, totally up to preference. Okay. Cool. Great. I know this is like kind of the boring part, but I mean, I think it's essential. Making sure that you have things labeled and color coded looks so much better. So here we go. We've got our main loops. Now, what are the ways that you can actually make this sound better, more exciting, and actually make this into a full song? I personally, when I start with something like this and I start to build this arrangement that has all sorts of different sounds in it, I usually like to start here and think of this as like, okay, this is like my chorus. This is the big moment for my production. I want to make sure that all of the elements are in that section. So what I usually do is I'll take that and kind of like drag it over a little bit with the idea that I have to build up to that point. Now, some songs start with a chorus, sometimes they start with a hook or a drop, and sometimes they have a little bit more of a slow burn, as you'd say. So they'll have an intro, maybe they'll have a verse that comes first before that. I personally, when I hear this, I want when it hits this moment to feel like some anticipation, some tension and release to get to that moment where the song drops. And to do that, we could write something entirely new here. We could completely start over. We could write some different chords, etc. Or what we could do is we can start to reuse some of these elements. That's really, really common when you hear commercial songs that are out, you know, on the Billboard charts, etc. And no matter what the genre, a lot of times you'll have some sort of hook that's like consistent throughout the entire song. And to me, this sort of little hook section, I don't know what you'd even call it, almost kind of sounds like a toy piano kind of thing. almost like a music box. I really like that. There's one thing about this though, is there's this like bass in there that I'm not 100% about. I don't know if you can hear it right here. Ooh. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but I already have a bass here. For me, just because I don't necessarily need a bass, I want to keep this isolated as much as possible. I'm going to do a little technique to get rid of that bass. And this works, I would say if you hear a sound that's in the extreme high or the extreme low on a sample that you don't like, usually a high pass or a low pass filter is a really great technique just to get rid of that. So what that is actually an EQ. Because my bass is a low frequency instrument in there, I'm actually just going to take, this is just an EQ in Logic, take this high pass, and high pass, a good way to remember it is highs pass through and cuts lows. High pass means highs pass through, you hear them, and it cuts lows. Low pass means lows pass through and cuts highs. So we've got our little high pass filter here, and I'm just going to use my ear again until I get rid of it. Oop, I just put it on the wrong track. Here we go. Here we go. Basically got rid of that. See that? Here it was before. You hear that? I hope it's coming through on everybody's end. Okay, and I'm actually gonna leave this like this so you can probably see it down here. See that low end? And we put this on. Gone. Magic. And this works really well if you have like low basses or like a really, really high frequency instrument. A lot of times if I want to, for example, on drums, like let's just say I like the hi-hats on this particular loop. The hi-hats and the snare, for example, if I want to make this more of a topper and create my own kick drum for it, I can do a similar thing. And it minimizes that low end. You still hear it rhythmically, but it gives you more ability to change up loops by doing that as well. You can also split up loops with MIDI, which if we have time, I can show you that as well. So that's just like a really quick technique to make this happen. Now what I'm going to do is start on my little intro. And usually a good rule of thumb to keep things interesting, I usually try to have something change every 4 bars. At least. Sometimes it's every 2 bars, but you don't want people to get kind of bored of something. And obviously there's also this give and take, I would say, when you're writing something that has the intention to have a top line on it or a vocal on it. You want to make sure that you're changing things around, but you're not doing so much that it's going to be hard for someone to write a melody on top, or you, depending on who you're working with. So for me, I will usually, just me personally, there was another question about like some of the songs that I make. I work with other people a lot. I do sometimes do my own music and top line it myself, but a lot of times I'm going to be giving it to somebody else. So I always try to keep that in mind. I want to make sure that it's like, it's hooky, it's exciting, it's changing the arrangement is engaging, but it's not so much that like the actual vocalist is like, oh, there's too much going on, I can't write a melody on top of this, because you could always add more after the melody is there and play off of that as a producer. So I'm going to start off here. I have like at bar 5 already, and again, using instinct, using your ears, I feel like at bar 5 I need to feel something, like something's got to change. It's just repeating. And we can do a couple of different things here. We can add something else, or we can create some sort of movement additionally with this particular sample to start to create some tension to release at bar 9 into something else. So in order to figure out what we do here, I'm going to start to craft some sort of verse with bar 9. And I'm feeling like the drum should come in, but the entire arrangement, I'm not feeling like it should come in yet. So all I'm doing, by the way, is option click and dragging with this audio, option click drag, depending on what DAW you're in, pretty much works for almost all of them, to copy and paste. So that's what I like to use. And I'm just going to bring over my drum. And sometimes we can continue with the hook, or we can just add some other elements to create some dimension. So I'm going to try, let's see, adding the bass here and just see how that sounds. Just adjusting for the volume. I want to repeat that. Maybe the piano can go here. Okay, so we're starting to build a little bit of a something here, but still at that intro, I'm like, it's cool, but what if I add some of the vocals there? I don't like that first one. Do this one here. I like that last little vocal. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is leave that little vocal, and then I'm going to try something to kind of give a little dimension here and start working with some transitions maybe to create this intro, give it a little bit more excitement and just something more engaging. So I'm going to go back and add another EQ, and I'm going to do what's called a filter sweep. This is another really cool technique, again, creating tension and release. And all it does is, we're not going to use the same EQ as we did before. What it's going to do, though, we're going to go the opposite direction and do a high cut or a low pass filter. And I'm basically going to cut off a lot of the high frequencies on this and then over time open it up. And that creates a lot of movement without really adding anything else to the arrangement. So I'm just going to use my ears again and kind of hear at what point frequency wise I want to do this. Okay, cool. So around 500 hertz, we'll start there. And then what I'm going to do is called automating, and that's just changing some parameter over time. By doing clicking A in Logic, you can do this. I'm going to choose, instead of changing volume over time, I'm going to change the high cut frequency over time that I just set. And that allows you to change this and draw in exactly what you want to happen. So I'm going to go to bar 5 here, which is, I kind of liked it at the beginning while it was a little subdued without any movement. We really want to hear some change though at bar 5. So let's start to open it up there. Cool. Okay, so this is starting to feel a little bit more exciting, but I still kind of feel like this moment right here, it's like it's still missing something for me. I need some sort of transition. I need something to make it more exciting. So I'm going to try to find some sort of transition. We can do this with our Apple Loop library, or we can go back to Splice. What I like to do when I'm looking for transitions, sorry, let me just move everybody out of the way here. Hold on. I have like everyone's faces trying to find my splice. I'm going to go back to here, and instead of going into create, I'm just going to search for what you would call a riser. That's some sort of kind of swell that you can have. That's a really great transition. And I just search riser. And what I can do is just go through and see what I like. This might be a little loud. Let me just turn it down. Make sure we have a good balance here. Don't want to blow everybody's ears out. Okay, already, I like that. That one I really like because I like the reverb at the end. Did you all hear that? Let me play that one more time. I actually like both of these. Let's try them both just to make that a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to download each of these and just drag them into Logic one by one. Cool. And then I'm going to line them up here. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to make sure that they're landing directly where I want them to. Pardon me while I'm moving the zoom all over the place. Okay, so I want that to go right onto bar 9, and I want to make sure that that also lands and does that little reverb tail also on bar 9. And then I'm going to change a little bit of the volumes here. We don't want it to be too loud. So let's see how this sounds here. Already way more exciting, way more going on, building some sort of tension. And I think it's still a little loud, but I still feel like that is giving us a little bit more energy. Another thing that you can do here, and this is a Logic fun tip. I kind of was hearing this at the end of this, but again, this is just like what my ears were hearing. There's a technique, and I'm gonna just like loop that do kind of at the end of that sample. I kind of hear it going down, sort of like a record, sort of. That's the best way that I can imitate it. And the way that you can do that with Logic is you hit T to bring up your tools and then choose the fade tool. And just by clicking and dragging to the end of the sample, it's going to do a volume fade, which is like exactly what you would expect. Or if you right click on that or control click, you can choose a slow down fade, which is going to be like, which again, really great transition, very cool. So we can change the length of this. I have it going for the whole bar 8, which I really like, but if it's too much, we can change it. We can make it shorter. So let's see again how that whole transition sounds. Okay. Work it. Add a little bit. And we want to maybe okay, so there's so many other things that are happening here that I need to clean this out a little bit. Like it's a lot. And I want to make sure that like I like everything that's there. This vocal sample, there's only really like certain notes that I actually like, and it's kind of like that. So it's like these 2 notes, and I'm going to get rid of the rest of them because I think it's too crowded. Again, we remember how we started with that whole stack and splice, and we're like, hey, here are the different elements that we have. We can choose to keep all of them or keep none of them. So this is now our opportunity to change it up and make it more interesting and work better for the song that we're creating. The other thing that I feel is that like there's something missing in this transition into this chorus as well, the same way as there was something missing here. Now we can copy and paste our transition, and that's like a really easy way to just make it more interesting. Okay, it's fine. But what else can we do? Instead of adding stuff in, why don't we take something away? And a really nice way to mark a transition from one section to the other is not just to add the transitions, but like, what if we take something out? Let's try taking out the drums in the last bar. And that again is going to give us a little bit more excitement. I kind of like that downbeat kick on 24. So what if I just put that kick there? And we might have like some hi-hats as well. We can adjust this a little bit, but if I make it really short. Too short. Trying to get rid of that little hi-hat, but we can add a little fade as well. We can also take the whole thing out, but let's just experiment a little bit. Okay, cool. So the other thing that I don't like is I don't want this here anymore. I know I liked it before, but I don't want it anymore. So we're going to take that hook out. I like it just as the intro. I like having this little like synth lead. Automatically, I'm feeling like it's less full, but it's still exciting. And the other thing I kind of want to try here too is like we could take all this out. Or we could maybe copy this kick and maybe do something like this and see how that sounds. Kind of like give it just the kick in that last section. Okay. We can make it even more exciting. Let's double that up in the last one. Why not? Oh. And since our verse is also the same length, let's double this up. Maybe we could do a cutout here of our drums, keeping it interesting. And maybe we could also try to have like some sort of like drum loop, drum fill as well. Let's see. Those entirely out. And then maybe we could do one of these at the end. We can use these again. Okay. And feel free to ask me questions. Cool. And we can like all of these as well, and maybe go back to our original sample. Sorry, some of this I'm just kind of doing again on instinct. Feel free to jump in if you have questions about what I'm doing, but I'm just slowing down the end of these. And then we're going to go back to our original sample and maybe just like fade it out. Going back into our automation by hitting A, we're just going to do the opposite that we did over here and just fade it out entirely. Okay. I don't think we necessarily need this. Okay. So let's see how that sounds so far into our chorus. A little bit too abrupt here for me. I think this one. Kind of want some other bigger impact here. This is another word to look for if you're looking for transitions and stuff. I kind of like that little clap. That's very nice. Let's try that. Okay. Cool. Let's see if those like sounds are enough. We can also speed up, by the way, the other way around. We could do that to our sample. So instead of it being a slow down, we could speed it up. So it sounds like this. Very nice. Okay, cool. So now we've got, starting with this regular, simple loop that we began with, just finding things that work. Now we have this, and this is a really great foundation if we're going to start to build a full song out of this. Once you kind of have like intro, verse chorus, you can then take that and repeat it again. You can then create your second verse and your second chorus, and maybe you can add some sort of different sort of melody on it. Just move this, sorry. Whatever instrument you want to use. I just have retro synth and Logic loaded up, but I know we're running a little bit short on time. I want to make sure that I answer some of these questions. But like, let's just say you want to find some little lead or even synth pads. Totally up to you. Let's say hyper lead. It's not very hyper to me. Okay. Okay, so if you want to add something in, for example, in this verse. I'm just gonna like record something and we can always change the sound since it's MIDI, just something a little bit simple. Here we go. Okay, make up for my little mistake. Okay. And then to quantize, Command A and then a Q. And by the way, it looks a little delayed because we're on Zoom. So the playback that I'm hearing is going through Zoom. So please don't judge my out of time playing. Just giving myself a little bit of, cut myself some slack here because it's on Zoom. But if you wanted to do something like this, we could also add this at the end here. Part of it. Okay, so let's hear what we did. And then I want to go to some questions too. Let's just listen back. Okay, there we go. Not bad for what? 40 minutes? We have a song. What was that?
Really awesome.
So again, I'm showing you this just as a tool. There are some folks who maybe do everything from scratch as well. I just think that one of the ways to make any sort of production on a higher level is these little tiny details. This, and again, using your ear as an instinct, if you start to feel bored, probably your listener might as well. So if you start to feel like, oh, I've been hearing this a little bit too much, within reason, of course, because for this, you could honestly argue this isn't super interesting. It's just a bass line and drums. But since for what I do, I would usually have a vocalist on this. So, I want to keep it pretty simple, but I don't want it to get boring. So there's a nice little balance there, but those details of transitions, of chopping up certain pieces of audio, adding different layers, filter sweeps, slow down, speed up, those sorts of things really make all the difference of keeping your listener interested and keeping the production exciting. So yeah, this was just in a couple of minutes of starting with some samples to I had no idea what was even going to come out. And now we have a full arrangement for a intro, verse, and chorus, which you can then take and make a full song. So I want to make sure I get to the questions. I know we only have 10 minutes left. Yeah, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, so we have 3 remaining questions. You've been really
Okay.
good at checking as you went along.
Yeah.
Michelle says these loops and beats cannot be used for sync. Also, the Splice end user license does not allow for sync for reasons such as the samples cannot be isolated, and in sync where stems are often necessarily, it is not possible to share these stems. Also, the sample's not exclusive to the user. So I suppose, yeah, that's quite a broad point. But one of the things that I heard other people do is stack other like hi-hats together, so it's not as recognizable. What would you say to that? Because I think you said in your experience you can use some of the splice loops.
Yeah, so I have a friend of mine who's been working in sync for the last, I want to say like 15 years. And he uses splice loops. And he works in library music. I understand the concerns though, because there are certain publishing companies that have their own opinions about it. This is specific to sync though, because I think when we're not talking about sync, we're just talking about producing for an artist. This is not like a conversation like it is in the sync world.
Right.
There's just limitations depending on your publishing company of what they allow in terms of original material. Some publishing companies are asking for stems, some aren't. So I think it depends on like your publisher. If your publisher is saying to you, hey, like I don't want you to use splice. We're not going to use it if you're going to use splice. And not even just splice, any loops or samples. Because usually it's not just splice, it's just any loops or samples. That is specific to your publisher. So it's definitely a conversation to have with them. As far as usage though, you are allowed to use samples that are royalty free for a various amount of purposes. So if there's limitations based on like who your publisher is or what they require, that just depends on an individual basis. And again, like I'm not a music lawyer either, but like the reality is that samples are used in almost everything a lot. And one of the ways to to disguise them. And this is something I've heard too is like, okay, well, don't use a lot of melodic loops without disguising them. But the drum loops are usually okay. I've heard that conversation as well when it comes to sync, that usually the drum loops aren't a huge problem for publishers. But the reality is that like samples across the board in music production are used all of the time. And I think as long as you are doing if you use it straight out of the package with no transposition, like no effects, not using anything on it, that's a different story, because it might get flagged because the technology is not smart enough to know that, hey, this is a royalty-free sample. It just says, oh, I've heard this before. So something like, any of those technologies that identify usage of samples or copyrighted material, they don't necessarily know. But again, like I think it's a conversation with your publisher specifically. What I don't do a lot of work for sync. I have in the past, but this is a long time ago. But when we're talking about like working with artists or producing music for that purpose, this is not usually a huge discussion.
Okay. And then we have a question from John Smith. He said, awesome, this is fun. How do you convert the loops to MIDI? Is that something you can do in Logic?
Yes. Okay, so let me show you. Get back to Logic here. We got it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Right. So here's my little drum loop here. Right. If you want to make this into like your own playable instrument, just click, drag it, hold it under here to where it says quick sampler. So like you're clicking and holding. And it's going to create a sample instrument. You can do it with Drum Machine Designer as well. And now I'm just playing it on my MIDI keyboard. and then it actually makes it into the individual samples. So that's really helpful if you want to recreate a loop with the actual samples that are there. You can do that. The other way to do this is if you have a MIDI track or like an instrument track. I'm just gonna change this here. You can click and drag it. I think, let me think. There's a, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember my keyboard commands.
Don't
To
worry.
get back to you on that one, because there's another way to like take it and convert it into MIDI here. If someone remembers what the key command is for it, but there's another way to like convert the actual loop itself into MIDI data. But I can't remember off the top of my head. But this is usually what I do, and then I'll just like play it back.
Yeah. Which is another way as well to like take inspiration, but then be creative with it as well, so that you're not just taking the loop and just using it, straight out of the box.
Totally.
Awesome. We might not get around to everybody's questions. Anahi's just dropped in a link to our creator circle on Facebook. So Chrissy's going to be joining us for an Ask Me Anything thread. So if we don't get to all of your comments, please do post them there and we can get back to you with that. We've only got about 3 minutes, so I'll see if I can squeeze one more in.
Sure. I see something like portal or granular synthesis. Yes. That's my answer. I love.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, if we, this one this was a little bit more of a general, like, hey, like, how do you like produce and some techniques for leveling up production. But if there's an opportunity in the future to talk more about like sound design and synthesis, like I'd be happy to maybe explore that in the future, because I love that. I mean, I'm using samples in this particular exercise, but I am totally a sound designer and I make my own presets all the time. So I love synthesis. I totally love it. And like, again, just like samples are a tool, so are synths. So are different types of synths, granular, additive, subtractive, all of that. They're just tools. So I love it. And just I'm glad that the EQ automation is cool. The difference between loops and samples. So a sample, usually that's like a general term. A loop is going to be something that's repetitive, that's usually synced to a BPM or a specific key, and then that's loopable. A sample generally covers all of them, but I think what you're referring to is an individual sample, which is also referred to as a one shot. And a one shot is just going to be like one kick drum, one snare, like that you can program in yourself. And generally, back to this conversation, back to sync and this whole conversation about usage of samples, a lot of times one shots are usually the ones that, like, if you just take a bunch of one shots or the transitions that we used, those sorts of things are one shots. And if you create your own beat with those, that's usually fine, without any issues. So that's another thing that a lot of folks will say is like, oh, I just stick to one shots, just not loops. One shots versus loops are really the terms. Yeah. So yeah. And again, I just want to encourage everybody, like, if you are working in sync, talk to your publisher. Everybody's really, really different. It's a very nuanced conversation. And there is like a conversation that you should have with those folks. It depends. It's a case-by-case basis about what they accept. And again, I'm really here just to show you tools. It's up to you to utilize them or not, Personally, I use a combination in all of my work of samples, of synths. I program my own drums. I program my own synth sounds as well. I use a combination of everything. And yeah, it's just really up to you what you decide to use. And if you have any concerns, talk to who you're working with. And just make sure that everything's good to go.
You're super correct, Chrissy. And like, you mentioned in the beginning, you could always use this as an inspiration. And so you take what you take the splice ideas, and you could, if you're very worried, like, Michelle has brought up some of her points, or anybody, you could always use that as inspiration, because you've already done a lot of the creative stuff. And then you can just put your own stuff in there and, make it your own. So that's always a tool as well as an inspiration, right?
100%.
Oh, absolutely. That hour just went super quickly. I've learned so much. I didn't know you could use that create tool in Splice, and transpose and time stretch. I knew you could do that in Arcade. I didn't know you could do that in Splice, so that's amazing. And next week's guest, we have Glory Lamphere. and the topic is what I've learned from music supervisors. So please join us for that, and head over to our creator circle if you have any unanswered questions, or you think of something later that you didn't get a chance to answer. So thank you so much, Chrissy, and everyone for joining.
It's so
Thank
nice
you
to
all
have
so
you.
much.
And
Take
Chrissy, I'm
care.
just calling you. And you rocked it
Thanks,
for the
Chrissy.
you rocked it for the teen camp, and we're all super excited about you being here at Earthstar and then maybe coming back again sometime.
Absolutely, I'd love to. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye,
everyone. Take care.
Bye.